tell me about if the driver gets in a situation where the brakes are applied hard enough to do that, what does it send signals to? Hydraulic control unit, that's right. List 3 of the 6 features of the NGS tester. That's a kind of a dumb question because you didn't know that. I did not even put that up there. I could have, but I saw what's the point. We got an NGS tester, but we usually use a different one than that one because it's old. Records and displays trouble codes and PID values, and it's got active commands. You got it? Just put those 3 down. All right. Inspection of the wheel speed sensor should include what? Excuse me, how can you access the ECU's memory and retrieve the codes? Well, they actually have scan tool, analog voltmeter. You can jump the diagnostic connector, read the flash of the ABS warning lamp. Some of you guys have already done that. And then there's, there's a couple of different scan tools listed on this right here. So just put 3 of those. Okay, number 4, inspection of the wheel speed sensors should include what? You got to verify they're mounted properly, not loose or damaged. Looking for clearance between a wheel speed sensor and a wheel speed sensor indicator. Do not allow metal filings to stay on there. I tell you what we did one time. We machined, on vehicle machined the the brake rotors on a Mercedes and wound up with an ABS lap because of it. Because the metal that was coming off was jumping over there and grabbing a hold of the ABS sensor, so we had to get. Yeah, you just got to get that off. So be aware of the fact that when you're machining the rotors on the car, you need to make sure that you don't have brake filings getting on the ABS sensor. Got me? All right, so check the rear bearings for looseness. That's going to cause the air gap to vary. Inspect the wheel speed sensor indicator for damaged or missing teeth. The way the toothed wheel can have teeth broken off of it, kind of like the flywheel on our Cadillac, right? Ensure the wheel speed sensor indicator is mounted right. I've seen those wheel speed sensor indicators, the little toothed ring, come off, basically come loose and lie about a wheel lockup that wasn't happening and cause the pedal to bounce under somebody's foot and they go right through an intersection. And that doesn't happen hardly ever, but it can happen. So if anything ever causes that wheel speed sensor to lie, and it ain't gonna let you have good brake pressure of those wheels. How many of you guys have had the Ranger jacked up in the back, looking at the ABS, or for whatever reason, you give it the gas and you say, well, I'll just put my foot on the brake and put this thing in park. You put your foot on the brake, when you throw it in park, it goes brrrr, thump. You've got your park paw bouncing because it's got ABS. It's not gonna let them stop suddenly. You got me the way it's fixed up. Always put it in neutral, let it stop before you put it back in there. Number 5. Okay. Let's see, wait a minute. Oh, you've actually got a picture right there. Everybody got that? In this order, from 1 through 6, you got your little illustration there. You got it? 1 through 6. You got it? Brake cylinder, master cylinder inlet port, pump motor, solenoid, valve body, control valve, and outlet ports. That's 1 through 6 in that order. You got it? All right, I'm going to turn this over. I'm almost through with this part of it. If the driver gets into a situation where the brakes are applied hard enough to cause the wheel to lock up, what happens in what order? That's number 8. Did I skip number 6? Never mind. Let me go back to number 6. What a buffoon. Draw a circle around the wheel speed sensor and the wheel speed sensor indicator. Did you manage to do that? Huh?
Is the indicator of that teeth that's on the hub, the rotor?
Let me get back over. Oh, there we go.
Yep, that was it.
You should be able to draw a circle around that one. And this thing right here is what it reads off of. Got it? There you go. Okay. Let's see. What's the purpose of the G switch?
Detects vehicle movement.
Detects vehicle movement and stopping. It's used on some 4-wheel drive vehicles because all 4 wheels are mechanically linked, right? And one of them can lock up and cause them all to lock up. So it's got to know. It can't make good decisions unless it knows that you're actually stopping, right? Okay, the ECU, let's see, number 8. Wait a minute, give me number 8. If the driver gets into a situation where the brakes are applied hard enough to cause the wheel to lock up, what happens first? The ECU will determine which wheel is in danger of lockup based on deceleration rate of that wheel. going to send an electrical signal to the hydraulic control unit, and that's going to activate the solenoid that controls the inlet isolation valve for the hydraulic circuit, and that controls that wheel. This action cuts off the fluid flow from the master cylinder, prevents any more fluid from reaching that wheel. And it actually machine guns it so that it can actually, it's like you're pulsing the brake pedal with your foot, except it's really, really fast. Since number 9, did you miss one? Did I go too fast? Okay, here we go. Determines which wheel's in danger of lockup. Looks at this, all right, that's 1. It's going to send an electrical signal to the hydraulic control unit to activate, and that was 2. 3 is to activate, that activates the solenoid that controls the inlet isolation valve. And number 4, finally, that's going to cut off fluid flow from the master cylinder to the wheel. Everybody got that? Okay. Now then, what is the ACU's pump and motor used for during an ABS event? We know what it's used for in a traction control event. It's going to apply one of the brakes. Since brake fluid is released each time the outlet dump valve is open, there's got to be a way to replenish brake fluid to the system. So that's accomplished by using a pump and motor. So you're not actually going to be doing things with your foot that's going to keep that there. They've actually done a lot of research and development on that. When the pump and motor are running, brake fluid is stored in accumulators pumped back to the master cylinder. The first guy that came out with anti-lock brakes was the guy that built it for airplanes, landing airplanes, you know, back in the 20s. You know, he came up with an anti-lock brake system to keep those from locking up. It was fully hydraulic, which was pretty cool. Number 10, hydraulic concerns will normally set a diagnostic trouble code on 4-wheel ABS system. True or false?
True.
False. All right, there you go. All right. Now then, let's go ahead and plow into this other test. Let's see how quick we can get through with it. Because the classroom is no fun. We want to be out there pulling steel in that high shop. You got it? Flip over to this other test, and we're going to go through this one as quickly as we can feasibly do it. This is brakes test 3. The brake shoe return and hold down springs are attached between the shoes and the anchor pin. Okay, now those are the hold down springs, or what?
The pieces that go into the shoes.
The one you have to push and turn.
Yeah.
Those are the hold down springs. So the return springs are attached between the shoes and the anchor pin, but the hold down springs are not, correct? When removing imperfections from a wheel cylinder board, do not remove more than 0.02 of an inch from an inside diameter. Now that's kind of silly. When I was doing brakes and stuff in cars back in the 70s, we would always rebuild the wheel cylinders every single time. When we put brake shoes on there, and most of those cars had 4-wheel drum brakes. I mean, my 69 LTD had disc brakes, so they were showing up. I mean, 66 Thunderbirds had disc brakes in the front. The 49 or 50 model Tucker had disc brakes. It was the first one to ever have those, I think, on a car. But long and short of it was most of them had drums, and we would do those drums every time. I mean, we would run a little brake hone in there that's like a miniature cylinder hone for for cylinders on an engine, and we had to make sure that when we looked up in there that we didn't have a lot of scoring and stuff. But the long and short of it is that's false. That's a lot closer than that. That tolerance is close. So number 3, a leaking wheel cylinder with deep scores should be replaced, not rebuilt. That's what your husband's truck had. You pull those things apart, you look down at them, they were awful. I mean, they had really deep rusty pits in them and stuff like that. Sometimes brake self-adjusters do not work because the driver seldom applies the parking brake. That's actually true, because the parking brake on a lot of them depend, the adjusters on particularly on those dual servos, depend on the parking brake application. When a leak occurs where the master cylinder meets the vacuum booster, fluid seldom leaks into the booster itself. That's false. A lot of the time it goes into the booster. Let me tell you something else right quick so you don't get confused. If you're looking at a master cylinder on a car and you see where some brake fluid has trickled from the master cylinder down the front of the brake booster and it's eaten some paint off of it, you ever notice that? Now that I've told you that, you'll notice it. That's not meaning that you need to replace the master cylinder, because there's a little bit of fluid that's going to be there. Not much, just a little bit, but that little tiny bit of fluid that has eaten the paint off that front thing doesn't mean, oh, that's it, you need to replace the master cylinder, unless you're having a problem with the brakes or something like that, or the fluid's going low. Just don't let that be a failure of that's causing you to replace the master cylinder. When measuring the diameter of a damaged brake drum, you can find the discard number cast into the drum.
True.
That is absolutely true in most cases. And that's what I've been showing you guys. Who all has measured drums with a drum micrometer in here? Didn't you use the drum micrometer?
And convert it over to inches.
Did you? Did you? You didn't ever do that, did you?
Wasn't here when that was.
The drum micrometer? That's one of those worksheets and all. All right. Let's see. Front wheel drive vehicles have dual servo drum brakes on the rear wheels. And I'll tell you something else. Just because a rear wheel drive vehicle, just because you're working on a rear wheel drive vehicle, doesn't mean you're going to have dual servo back there either. What kind does that 97 Chevrolet have on it? What kind of rear brakes? Huh? Leading, trailing, yeah. I mean, it's a, one of those. Barreling is the term used to describe a condition of greater wear toward the drum's rim. No, that's in the middle. It's actually going to be in the center of it. It's going to be bigger. Okay, service drum brakes stop wheels from turning because of what? This ain't rocket science. Friction between the brake shoe and the drum. That ain't complicated. After braking, hydraulic fluid flows from the wheel cylinders to the master cylinder because why?
Springs move the shoes.
The springs pull the shoes away from the drum. That pushes that fluid back up in the line. It goes back to the master cylinder. When drum brakes are applied, the brake shoe is moved by what? That's right. Our hydraulic pressure is pushing all those little pistons. What could not cause one brake to drag?
Wall.
Mm,
No, I'm sorry, it's D.
One brake. We're talking one brake. Which one of those is right? Damaged backing plate, wheel cylinder, piston not returning, drum wobble. All those could cause it. An improperly adjusted master cylinder push rod is not going to make just one brake drag. Which could not require a driver to insert unusual force to brake. Everything's really quiet in here. Huh? How about loose rivets on the brake shoes?
That never happens.
Well, it depends. I used to rebuild brake shoes. Yeah, we would actually take the, the asbestos material, and we would take the, drill the rivets out that were in there, and then we actually had brand new rivets, and the shoes were drilled, and then we would actually crimp them. Now I was working at a truck shop then, and it was more prevalent on big trucks than it was. But there were some, that is an old practice, but it's something that's done. They would reline the brakes. That's what they call relining the brakes. Put new brake linings on there. Number 14, which of the following steps is done first when rebuilding a wheel cylinder? What'd you say? You said C?
I'd say remove the boots.
Yeah, removing the boots looks like a good answer to me. Let me talk to my supervisor for a second here. Hey, Tammy. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Right. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Right. Thank you. What about that IDS, whatever? That I'll talk to you about that later. It's a blank drawing thing right now. I'm finishing up a test for my students anyway. All right, I will. All right, I would remove the boots. Believe it or not, the answer, he says, push out the cups and springs and all that. I would remove the boots first. You can't do that unless you remove the boots, please. Which of the following steps is done last when rebuilding a wheel cylinder? What are you thinking? Everybody like that? Lubricating the part sounds good to me. Okay, which of the following steps is done first when installing brake shoes?
Install the parking brake hardware.
Well, yeah, I like that. They're always saying attach the shoes to the backing plate, but that parking brake hardware has got to be attached to the shoe first.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just smart. Even if all of it, I like the ones, I just love the ones that don't have a pin and a horseshoe, but you can actually it's got a little sort of a hook
Yep.
that just hooks them on there. Those are really slick. All right. Which of the following would not cause brakes to grab?
What's
Linings
threaded-
contaminated with grease or oil?
What's threaded drums?
Let me mention, threaded drums. Let me tell you, what's the threaded drum going to do? If it's turned too fast, if you get that thing turning too fast, it'll cause the brake shoes to try to walk and go click, click, click. But long and short, I had this Mazda one time that was really a brand new car. A couple of stories about brakes, and I will mention this right quick, and then we'll be through. First one was the lady has got this GLC that's not that old. Both these are Mazda GLC stories. Okay, so she's driving, and they talking about when you hit a brake, you boo, and it wasn't a pulsation so much; it was just a sort of a vibration when you hit the brake. So I got it up on my lift there, and I pulled the wheels off, and she had parked that thing after going through a mud hole or something, and then went on a trip. And when she came back, that water that had been trapped between the brake pad and that rotor had made a rusty spot on the rotor. And every time that rusty spot went under that, like that. And so what I did was, I took my little drill, I put a socket on it that would fit the CV axle, put it in neutral. With everything removed, and this thing just sitting here naked, I spun it up and I held some 80 grit sandpaper against it and got rid of all that rust. Just spun it with my drill and held that 80 grit. And the service manager came over there and he goes, "What are you doing?" He was the guy I went to high school with, so I wasn't too intimidated by him. I said, "I'm just trying to save this lady some money. She don't need no brake shoes or nothing. She just needs this rust cleaned off of here." And so he says, "Well, you ain't making us no money." Anyway, when she came back and picked it up, she was tickled pink that she was paying $20 instead of $200. And whenever the field service rep came around, I told him about it. He goes, "She'll be back to get more work done because you treated her right. That was a good thing you did." Well, anyway, there was another one that I had, and whenever it was cold and you first started up, this car wasn't very old. You go to apply the brakes, and it would lock up the rear brakes. I mean, as soon as you just begin to touch your brake, they would lock up. Well, you're thinking proportioning valve and all that. Well, the long and short, this particular one, I'm talking about barely moving parking lot speed. It would just lock up the rear wheels. And so I took the brake shoes off, and the drums off, and the shoes really looked good. They looked like they were brand new, but when I would feel them, there was a little bit sticky, and I wasn't really sure what that was. But I got some brake parts cleaner and cleaned them really, really good without even taking them off the car. Just cleaned them up, wiped them off really good, and drove it again, and it was perfect. And she never complained about it again. That was basically just cleaning the wheels. But I told you there was going to be 2 stories, but I lied. There was going to be 3. This lady, there was a girl that was in here one time, and her dad, they had a Honda Element. It was under warranty at the time because it hadn't been driven very much. His daughter was overseas and it belonged to her, and it had just been sitting behind the house. And so it was a 08 model at the time. So they drove it over to the rear brakes were making some racket, So they drove it over to the dealership in that particular town, which is not this town. Obviously, we ain't got a Honda dealership here. And he put it in for service. It says, "Hey, I'm here for a warranty repair. The brakes are really noisy in the rear." So the guy that they had, and that place is under totally different management now. Nothing like that happens there anymore. He comes out with a brake drum that is, a rotor that's completely ground away to nothing. And he goes, "You've been abusing these brakes. We're not going to be able to fix this under warranty because you've been riding the brake, and we're going to charge you $900. And he says, "I'm not going to pay that. Just put it back together." And so he had his daughter bring it over here. So we brought it over here. When we jacked up and took it off, all that was wrong with it was the brake rotors were rusty because it had been sitting up. And so we took all of that stuff off and we spun it up, and kind of like I did with the other, and we just sanded the rust off the rotors and put it back together, and there was no problem with it. You know what I mean? But one of the things that people like to cheat folks on, for some reason, I ain't saying all shops do this, but if a shop doesn't have integrity, a lot of times they'll try to stick it to you on your brakes because you're going to pay whatever you need to make sure your brakes work right. You know what I mean? So make sure that you're on the up and up, because that makes you look really, really bad. If you said something was needed that's not needed, you need to be able to back up what you say if somebody looks behind you. Anyway, that's the end of that test, and I've told you all the stories I'm going to tell you for a little while.